Your business is in sync with LiveSync. This webinar is powered by LiveSync Accounting and Xero Accounting Software. Introducing Attorney Dexter Distajo.
So now we are ready to deal with sales and receipt cycle. Okay. So as an accountant, you have to know how to use Xero for sales and receipt transactions. So in sales, in Xero, this is what Xero can do for us. It can help us create invoice. It can help us create quotation. We can record payments on each invoices, either partial or full. We can also create credit notes to the invoice and then allocate that particular credit note to the invoice, or a separate standalone credit note that you can do. You can edit, delete, and void credit notes, invoicing, and quotations. You can send statement of accounts. You can repeat the sales invoicing, especially when you are doing retainer business. So if you're asking fixed fees for your customer, we would advise that you would use the repeating invoice feature. There's also that auto reminder. You can attach supporting documents within the sales invoice, quotation, and receipts, and then be able to send the same attachment as an option to your customer if you would want to. Then an option to select different templates of your invoices, quotations, receipts, and credit notes. And then finally, Xero allows us to send invoice and receipts and quotations and credit note by email. Okay, particularly in the sales invoice, we can automate the creation, the approval, the generation, and the email of the invoice to your customer by doing a repeating invoice feature. So we will do that one by one in Xero right now. So okay. Now there are so many ways to create sales invoice in Xero, and then I can only tell you I can tell you two of them. One would be going directly from here as a shortcut, or going through its sales dashboard. So this is the sales dashboard of Xero, mini sales dashboard. So if you go to sales overview, you would be looking at the dashboard of the sales, and then Xero would actually separate the invoices dashboard and the coach dashboard. But all dashboard has different stages. So you can start an invoice as draft. You can ask someone to approve it if you have only an invoice only access, and then submit it for payment. You approve the invoice and then for payment. And then there's also that category of what are your overdue invoices. You can send statement of account here. You can create credit notes here. You can repeat invoices here. And then you can also create quotes here. And then if you have a lot of information already, you can search your invoices by dates. You can filter them by dates. You can filter them by particular date transaction. You can search by quote or invoices. Okay. Now let's start creating our first invoice. I can quickly click here. That's one option. Or I can just simply click here. That's another option. Okay, this is where I would tell you that this plus sign was actually a unique feature in QuickBooks Online. So for some reason, Xero has also copied this. No? So now we have this convenience. So this is one of those things that is nice about QuickBooks. They have this one. Now Xero has that also as well now. Now let's create our first invoice. So now here, we will create our first customer without necessarily creating the name of the contact here. So directly, you can create the customer the first time while you're creating the invoice the first time for them. This is your date of the invoice. This is the due date. So take note, in our default, we said 15 days each month, right? So the default is this date, but then you can actually select that date if you'd want. Now there's a trick also if you are in data entry. Instead of, I'm not very used to going to calendars like this, no, especially if you're dealing with long years, right? Intervals. So what I do, I would just say 02, which is the day, and then I can put 2 as the day, and then 6 is the month. And then if I hit that, automatically it enters that. So that's one technique. You can also put 3, 6, and then you would want to say 2019. Yes. So those are the tricks that you can use. So this is one from your default when we set up the invoice settings. So this series is generated automatically. So every time you approve, it creates a new invoice, the series number. Okay. Reference is a free text. You can write anything here. It's up to you. This is now the template that you would want to use. You can preview your invoice. There's nothing there. You can also make attachment from here. So you can upload files from your computer. So it will accept Word file, PDF, PNG, all other files. Excel, it can also accept also, right? And then this is where you select your transactional currency. So when you're creating an invoice and you are doing a multi-currency system, you would need to ask yourself whether what currency I would issue to this particular customer. So normally you would use peso, but for example, for USD, okay, you can select USD and then the typical xe.com conversion will show up here, okay? But if you don't want the xe.com, you can change your currency here manually, override that. So that's one option. So that's how you do it. But for now, let me do a Philippine peso currency. So let's issue one particular invoice to a customer, and I'm charging this customer 2,000 pesos. If I want a discount of 10%, I just put the full amount of 10 without putting decimal because it's considered already percentage. So you take note that there's already a discount here. Otherwise, you leave it blank. Your default sales would be sales, or you can change that. Or if it's not in the list, you can create a new account, right? If you'd want. So then you can create the chart of accounts within the invoice itself. The default, because this is sales invoice, is the VAT output VAT, sales VAT. Or then if you don't have that, you can select here or create a new tax rate. That's one shortcut. Now, this is where I was talking to you about earlier about tracking and cost centers. So for example, this customer is a sale of the branch 1, and this is a sale for this department 1. So now we are tracking that this particular sale is a sale of branch 1 and department 1. That's the purpose of tracking here. Here, you can drag and drop and move the rows if you'd want. You can delete the extra rows that you do not need. You can add rows as much as you can do below. You can do as many text as you would want. Okay, you can do that. In your invoice, it will adjust the text automatically. So it's very responsive when you're printing the invoice now. But for now, this is what we wanted to do for now. One single line, very easy. So here we're creating a draft. You have an option. So if you're an advisor or a standard user or an invoice only, and then you can approve and pay, you can just quickly approve this. Otherwise, if you are a invoice only, then you can only save this as a draft. Or if you have a process wherein junior accountants prepare these entries and then senior accountants will approve it. So either you can save this as draft and then or submit that for approval. For our purposes, let's do save a draft. Our window will close and bring us to the dashboard directly to, and then it will tell us that we have a draft invoice, one draft invoice. You can actually approve this here, or you can ask someone, or your highest access would be able to drop this from here. Now, here's a question. At this level, is this already recorded in your ledger? The answer is no, okay? The only time your sales invoice will be recorded in your accounts receivable and the revenue ledger is when you approve this one. So once I approve this, it gets posted in your ledger already. So it is clicking the approval button that will record this to your ledger. So what happened after you record it, approve it, your invoice? So what happened is this small box will show up. This is now your data entry for your payment. But before doing that, let me shift to another screen and let me run my accounts receivable report. So in my accounts receivable report, is showing me one particular invoice already outstanding. Let me go to another screen and run my profit and loss report. So I highlight this so that I can show this at any time. Yes, I have this. Now let's do another screen for sales tax report, whether my sales tax report is updated because we did a VAT. So I'll move this to June 30. Let me show all this. Then yes, that one particular transaction is recorded this. And therefore, right? So this is my payable right now of my tax so far. Let's run another report. I'll duplicate this screen and run a balance sheet. So my balance sheet recorded that tax payable here, and then your receivable, and then your current earning is showing because this is in your P&L right now, which is 20,000. So everything is interconnected and updated immediately, even to the point of your taxes is all done here, right? Now, at this level, you can do options. You can repeat the bill. You can void. You can copy. You can edit. You can add credit note. You can share an invoice, meaning email that. Turn off reminder also if you can turn off, but the default here is it's on reminder, right? Now, you can email this directly to your customer. And then if you want to add attachment to it, you have the option by just ticking this. Or if you want to have a copy, because normally you will not receive a copy, but if you want to receive a copy of this invoice, you just tick this one as well, send me a copy. Let's see how it would look like using that template. It says print, but actually it will not print. It just produce for you a PDF. So this is how our invoice would look like right now, right? Very simple, because we're using a standard template. Now we are ready to make a partial payment for this. Let's say I'm making a payment of 15,000. What I would do is I would just select the date of the payment. Let's say I get the payment today as well. Now look that when we are we're making the payment, you will see in a drop down a very concise and small list of accounts. Why? Because the default is actually the bank type, and then all the account when you created, remember the standard chart of account, because we enable the payment, these advances to stop will show. Now, if any account you will enable payment, that account will show up as a selection. Otherwise, you keep your drop down very neat by just limiting to the accounts or the bank accounts and the cash accounts. So here we receive this payment by bank, and then maybe you're using a voucher, so maybe the customer receipt voucher number 1245. Okay, now you can attach here whatever supporting document. When you hit this payment, what would happen is it records a partial payment. It closed the window, but still it's still in your waiting for payment. It's not in paid. Why? Because there is still due. Now, the invoice would only move to a paid status if the invoice is fully paid. If there's a single centavo that is not paid in this invoice, that invoice will show as waiting for payment status. I can do a search right now. Yeah, see? It will show you the name of the contacts, and it will search you as well, so of the invoice particular. So if I say 001, when I click this, it brings me to the invoice, which is basically this one. So this search button is very intuitive. It will help you get to the invoice or the document immediately by using this search button. So now our payment is recorded here. Now, if you want to see your entry of the payment, you have to go to the invoice and then click payment, this blue color here. It brings you to the payment transaction invoice of the payment of that invoice. You can also attach whatever scan copy you can do, and then it has also different options as well. You can send a receipt to your customer by doing that. Okay, by using by using the brand, right? So you select what brand are you using to send this. It's fine. And then you can also print the PDF of the receipt here. So you just select what brand you're using. We're using a standard PH, and then it generates to us a PDF. Then you can send this separately in your personal email to your clients. Okay. So this is the receipt that they will receive. Okay. Otherwise, if you don't like, and then leave this mark reconcile. We'll discuss this once we are doing bank reconciliation. But if you made a mistake in the payment that you have entered, don't worry. What you can do is you just click remove and redo. Okay. That payment is removed. Okay. So it's gone again, and then you can re-enter again. So what I would do is I will enter what we did right now. Done. Yes. So then we are successful in creating our invoice. So what happened to our accounts receivable? So it's 22,000. I will update this. There. It's less now. And then your P&L would be the same, obviously. Yeah, no, it will change. So no, it will not change your P&L. And then your balance sheet would change because you have a bank transaction already. So see your bank, you receive this money, your receivable is already reduced. Nothing to do with your tax anyway for that. Okay. Now, that's how you create an invoice. Now, how about creating a quote? Quote is very simple. You can click here at the same time. You can also do it by doing the plus button. So now quote is very straightforward. The process for quote would be you create a quote, you send to your customer. Okay, when your customer accepts it, you mark the quote accepted in Xero, and then you can create a sales invoice out of that quote. So here we'll create from scratch another quote. So now I'm creating another customer from scratch. I'm creating this quote, 30 days expiry, and then let's say I have this reference here. Then I select the theme of the template for my quote, and then again, you can also select the peso the same way you're doing a sales invoice. And let's say one-time marketing strategy service, right? I quote him maybe 100,000, if you can do that. And then discount if applicable. At this level, you would need to select now the sales account that you need to do. So maybe you have a different sales code for sales one-time service. You can do that and create that. But for now, let's simplify things. We can use one particular sales account. Then this is your VAT. And then this is your branch. Let's say this sale is for branch 2, and this is for department 2. Again, it's tax automatically calculates the VAT, and then you can put details of that, terms and conditions of your quote, or you can also put the title of the quote and the summary of the quote. That's an option. You can attach it also here, document if you would want, if you have something to attach. Now, what you do is either send this directly to the customer or just wait, just save it first and maybe come back later and then edit the quote on a later period. But if you're ready to approve that, so see it's in the draft. If you're ready to send this, you can actually send now to your customer. So the next step is to send this one. Send. You put the email, and then the template of the email template will show up here. You can put yourself your email so that you can be CC'd. Then you send. Okay. So for now, what I would do, I would not actually send that. I would just mark that as send. Okay. So as if I've sent that, there's an option. So what will happen now in your quote dashboard, that same dashboard from draft is now in send. So what if it's sent? What would happen? The customer will communicate to you in a few days until this is acceptable. So okay, the customer may say it's okay, 100% acceptable, or please revise this, or no, we don't like it. So whatever is the result, you have these 3 options. You can accept this as full, decline this, or revise or edit your quote and resend again. Okay. Now, Once they come back and then you come up with an agreement with the quote, then you can accept that. So for this case, it's not complicated. Let's mark this as accepted. So if this quote is accepted, what would happen now? Now you would now perform the services, right? And once you're ready to perform the services and you've done that, you need to issue now an invoice. Okay? Now, can you issue an invoice separately from the quote? The answer is yes. Creating an invoice does not require a quote that must be created prior to that. But if you're creating a quote, you can actually convert the quote with the same information without inputting the same data again to a new draft invoice. How do you do that? You can create invoice to this. You can mark invoice and then create this as a draft invoice. So what happens? Xero now create a draft new invoice with copying all these details. If you do not need to change anything, just quickly approve this in the system, right? Now let's look at your accounts receivable. You have this already in your accounts receivable, okay? Next thing we need to understand is how to create credit notes. Creating credit notes, you can do this directly by clicking here or create a credit note from here. Or if you identify that a credit note is directly allocated or connected to a particular sales invoice, then you create the credit note directly from that invoice. So I'll give you an example here. This is the item that we created to do, from the quote. Now, how would I know that this sales invoice is coming from the quote? Or if you ask the question, what is the quote reference for this particular invoice? Very, very simple. You just scroll down, you see this here. When you click this, this brings you to the quote that is linked to that invoice. Or in that particular quote, because this is already invoice, what was the invoice I created from this quote? This is also here at the bottom. So you can click that, brings you to the invoice. So there is a connection here. Now brings me back to the credit note. I can create a credit note from here. So let's say, unfortunately, there was portion of your service that you have not created, but you have invoiced it 100%. You come to an agreement with the customer that you're only going to invoice him the 50%, right? So then you issue a credit note for the 50% of this. How do you do that? Add simply a credit note, put your name here, and then whatever is the reference. Now take note, your credit note is using the same series number of your invoice. My suggestion for your credit note, you create a separate series number of your credit note. That is totally different from your sales invoice. So normally what you would do, put a different prefix. For example, in this number, you can start with 001 again, right? But you have to track this every time you create a credit note. Now, I want to put a credit note of the 50% of this. What I did, I just put 50 here, and then I'm creating 50% credit note, automatically allocating this credit note to this particular invoice. When I approve this, what would happen is that that credit note is now attached as like a payment in your invoice. So what is due now is only half of this system. If you want to go and check this credit note, you just have to click this one, this particular amount in blue text, and then you can see the invoice. If you don't want to connect because you change your mind that maybe you should not connect to this invoice, you just click the X here, okay? The connection, the credit note allocation will not be on that particular invoice. So if I go to that invoice now, that another invoice here, I have removed and it's not connected. But what is it showing me? Because I have a credit note for that same customer, Xero is advising me that there is a credit note invoice that can be allocated to this. Now, there are two ways to allocate a credit note. One is directly clicking this link from here and put that amount and then click allocate credit. Another way of doing that is going to the credit note. And then from the credit note, you can allocate it. So I open the credit note here that is showing in my dashboard, and then I just say allocate credit note. So either way you can do that, meaning you are now allocating that particular credit note to that invoice. So what would happen to that invoice when I click to that invoice is allocated, and then our dashboard in Xero would show now that that invoice is fully allocated. It's not showing here. It's now in our paid column, that credit because fully allocated already. Yeah. So now what would happen? Let's look at your accounts receivable report. Okay. And then it's showing it's lesser now, right? It's fine. Now, if I need to copy or create a new invoice, or let's say repeat the invoice, I can actually repeat a particular invoice every month. So how do you repeat that invoice? If, for example, you're doing retainer every month, instead of every month you're creating a fresh invoice, your option would be copying that or create a repeating if it's the same detail. So I would hit repeating, and then you set up your how many times you're repeating this invoice. So you'd say, I would want this invoice repeated once a month, and then the first repeating would be next month, July 13, right? But for our example, I would want to say this is July 30, and then 15 days following the invoice date. Optionally, I can select when will this repeating invoice would end. So maybe 2021, right? I can do 2021, and then I do March. No, sorry, June. No, May. Then May 30, 31. I can end that way. Otherwise, I leave it blank. It's optional. Now you have three selection. You can, when the date will come to generate and repeat the invoice, or option would be Xero will create a draft, and then you can do something after that on your own manually, or automatically Xero will approve the invoice, meaning it's posted automatically in your ledger. Or the best way and what we usually do is approve and sending, meaning it not only posts and approve the invoice to your ledger, it will also automatically send the invoice to your customer. So technically, you can create an invoice, repeat that, and then slip on it. And if you only have one revenue transaction and it keeps repeating, that invoice is issued immediately by email to your customer while you are sleeping. Okay, that's the one way of automating your invoice in Xero. So what I would do, take note, I would put the date here as 12. No? So it's fine. I leave that. So that what does it mean? You can actually create a repeating invoice from the scratch and then set up the date to day, so that when you save this, it will create now the first invoice generated from the repeating. Now you would send the email of the customer here. If you have set up your customer email already, it will appear here. So again, you can also attach the PDF, and then you can also give us a copy to yourself. Then done. Cancel, and then save. So what would happen? So I cancel this, and then save. Done. Okay. Asking really me an email on this. Yeah, because you have to send it, so it will ask for an email. So then you have a repeating invoice. The next invoice would be June 12, and then it will end in 31. Approve and send status. So in your invoices, you have generated all these particular invoices in your system already, right? And then all transactions will now be reported in your AR as well. So let's look at your AR. Your AR now is increasing on the sample customer. If you want to see the breakdown for each of this customer, you can do that by clicking show invoices. Then you would see for this particular customer, you would have 2 invoices outstanding, right? So that's 1. 2, you can actually send statement to a particular customer. So let's say I would want to send statement. Okay, expand the date so that it will filter more customer. So let's say I would want to send statement for the sample customer. Okay, now this is now your statement of account. You have 2 types of statement. You can have outstanding and activity. Outstanding would mean showing only invoices and their due amount. So what is the due amount of all the invoices as of this date? You can also do activity statement, meaning it will show all the payments and the credit notes that is applicable to here. So if you notice, the credit note is showing up on this particular customer as well. So the payment and then the invoices history is showing in the in your report. So you can email this. You can also print this as a statement. Let's do that. This is how it would look like. So this is how it look like with your statement of account. Okay. So that's it. We've covered everything about sales invoicing. That's all about the sales overview.